lastly, the architecture owner is the person who understands what the tricky bits are of the application, and they work with the product owner to negotiate to say, you know what, I know this doesn't have a huge business value, but we can't go live without it, and I'm kind of worried we won't be able to make this work. So can we move it up a little bit in terms of priority? Because I really need to figure this out, or we're going to be in trouble. Okay, and it's more than what we call a spike. It's a real story that needs to be built. But a spike is like a proof of concept throwaway thing. This is a story that is technically tricky that I want to build earlier. And the architecture owner, so this is why we call it product owner, architecture owner. They have a little bit more authority than just a regular team member, and they can go and have those heart-to-heart with the product owners regarding priorities. It's a really good thing. Now, the product owner makes the final decision. That's just like in the spirit of Scrum, but hopefully there's a good relationship between the product owner and the architecture owner. And we have additional specialist roles. These are not formal roles. Don't get hung up about the terms and that kind of a thing. Just wanted to sort of give you an indication that there's other people that could be working with you on larger projects. Okay, how does this all work? And I've talked through some of this already, so I'll be able to sort of pick up the pace here. I've taken the front part of the overall DAD life cycle and blown it up. This is inception, and I've already talked through some of the goals. And by the way, history or our stats show that people are doing this. We see that average agile teams, not traditional, agile teams are spending on average 4 weeks prior to coding, getting ready to start the project. Forming the team, getting your environment, getting tooling, maybe setting up continuous integration, setting up your work area, and doing a little bit of requirements. I know, I'm not supposed to do that in Agile, but guess what? Survey says we are. So if we are, let's admit it, but let's try and minimize it. We don't want you to do big requirements documents. Let's be clear about that. But let's take an Agile approach to understanding the initial scope, understanding the initial architecture. And so the surveys show that Agile teams are doing some requirements modeling, architecture modeling, spending some time justifying the project, doing some level of estimating, and a high-level release schedule. When I say modeling, it could be pictures, it could be some text. A model is both, right? So some teams are doing either textual requirements or hopefully visual requirements is even better. In DAD, we see this reoccurring rhythm across projects at different levels. Every day on any Agile project, you have this rhythm of coordinate, collaborate, and conclude. You have a daily meeting. Scott calls it a coordination meeting. I call it a daily stand-up. The reason he calls it a coordination meeting, and by the way, I never book a coordination meeting. Okay? I book a stand-up. He calls it a coordination meeting just to hammer home the point that it's not just status. It's like a one-day project plan for the team, project planning session, where I say, yes, what I did yesterday, what I'm going to do today, what my impediments to my work are. But a team is also talking about their dependencies. I'm working on this afternoon, John, but I need you to add the column to the database first. And he goes, oh, John says, oh, I didn't know that. Okay, I'll change my priorities. I'll work on the database change so that you can work on your stored procedure this afternoon. That's what happens in a daily meeting. That's daily coordination meeting. Okay. Anyway, that's coordinating your day's work. You collaborate during the day to get work done, and then you conclude the day, stabilize your work. Hopefully you're going home with a stabilized build. The build isn't broken. You have working software, ideally. Okay. You see the same 3C rhythm at the iteration level. You spend a few hours doing an iteration or sprint planning session. You spend several days doing some work, and then you wrap up the iteration with your demos, your retrospectives, part of the Scrum ceremonies. And you see the same kind of thing even at the high level. We coordinate in inception to plan, I don't want to say plan, that sounds too heavyweight, to frame up the project. Then we coordinate over several iterations to do the work, and then conclude the work by getting ready and putting it into the hands of the stakeholders. We have diagrams in the book to show more details about what goes on in each of those 3C rhythms. So for inception, we want to spend a few hours at the beginning of, by the way, inception could be 2 weeks, could be 1 week, could be 4 weeks, could be 1 day, whatever makes sense for you. Spend some time scheduling meetings with stakeholders to do your requirements envisioning and your architecture envisioning, etc. Do the work, and then have some kind of very lightweight review meeting to say, this is what we think the project is. We think it's 6 months. We think it's going to be about $500,000, and we think it's going to be roughly these features with this set of risks. these assumptions, we're delivering it for these stakeholders. That's not a lot of documentation, does not have to be, okay? But that's good stuff to know before they give you $500,000, okay? So let's keep it agile. Construction, I've taken now the middle part of that diagram. I'm not going to spend any more time on it. Just think of it as a combination of Scrum practices, extreme programming practices, and some other stuff like agile modeling and agile data practices that Scott has written about for years, okay? All right, and then another diagram to show the kind of stuff that goes on. And that's not at the iteration level, this is at the phase level, where we prove out the architecture in the early iterations, build the rest of the product, and then get ready to transition it. But some people ask us, how long is a construction iteration? It's pragmatic agile, whatever makes sense for you. Some people have 2-week iterations, some people have difficulty creating working software, which is a criteria for good iteration, even every 4 weeks, for whatever reason, okay? There are big companies that have difficulty doing it every 2 weeks. So whatever makes sense for you. Survey says average teams have 2-week iterations. We're getting better at that. Remember 5 or 10 years ago, the average team had a 1-month iteration. In fact, Scrum used to talk about 30-day sprints, right? Not anymore. Our industry's capability has improved. And then here's another 3C rhythm diagram that shows the kind of work that goes on during a construction iteration or sprint. The work that you do planning the sprint or iteration, the practices that you might wish to use, and then concluding the iteration or sprint. Now, please, you don't have to do all those things, right, to use DAD. If you use Scrum, you could argue you're using DAD. You're just using a subset of it. What we would love for you to do is to understand in your organization that there's a role for an inception phase and maybe an explicit transition phase, if that's required. But you are using DAD. If you're using Scrum, just a subset of it. And my point is that if you're using Scrum only and not extreme programming, which by the way is highly unlikely because you'll probably at least be doing continuous integration if you're going to be successful, then, which is an extreme programming practice, then do 2 or 3 or 4 of these things. Just try to get the Scrum framework nailed down and get that working for you, and then take it to the next level by adding more practices when and if you're ready, and if it makes sense. And then a typical day. This is how a typical day works. It's not prescriptive, please. Some of you who are really hardcore Scrum people would say, Mark, why did you put updating the task board during the coordination meeting? I'm not. I'm just saying that's where it could happen. Ideally, it's happening actually all day long. And if I were to do this diagram again, I think I would probably put it in the middle, not as part of the coordinate activities. So please don't send me angry emails. This is pragmatic, whatever works for you. And then transition phase, I've taken the last part of the diagram and talk about the things we need to get the system into the hands of the stakeholders and hand it off properly so that they're happy. And transition, the survey says the average team spends about 4.6 weeks actually getting the solution into the hands of the stakeholders and making sure they're happy. Now I know some of you folks in smaller projects, smaller companies can do this in a week or a day, but we're talking about serious enterprise, complex projects here. That's the average we're seeing. So, by the way, 24% are doing it in 1 day. That's a quarter of them. But many people are taking much longer. Yeah. Recently talked to somebody who says that they're doing it takes 6 months to put theirs into production. 6 months. And it's not their fault. It's because of they have to work within regulation and other companies to coordinate the work. Just the way it is. How to govern our agile projects, sort of wrapping up here. Governance. So again, a lot of people think governance is a bad word. I even sometimes, until recently, sort of shivered when I heard the word governance, because it can be pretty scary, but it doesn't need to be. These are aspects of governance. This is traditional governance with, oh my goodness, I do initiation and a feasibility review, system concept review, planning, feasibility review, number 2. You guys seen this kind of stuff, right? Agonizing. In the example I told you of this big project I worked on, we were using stage gate approach. So we had to provide requirements documents and architecture documents. So we just figured out a way to sort of do the minimum possible to make people happy and sign documents and things. But it was sad because it's kind of a game, right? We need to change the way we do governance. You got again, there's a lot more information in the book, but essentially aspects of good governance: be stakeholder driven, be transparent, motivate, don't dictate, enable, don't enforce. Optimize the IT whole, not just governance. What else do I want to talk about? Be suitable to task, customize it. So at Canadian Pacific, fortunately, they understood that even though the project I was using had to use the existing governance, that wasn't going to work in the future. So while I was coaching 2 teams, I was also working with their PMO to come up with agile governance for them. So now Canadian Pacific has governance for traditional projects and governance for agile with different metrics. Some governance is built right into DAD in terms of the milestones. We talked about the milestones, so I'll keep going. Now, a good thing is there's governance already happening on, good governance stuff already happening on agile projects, even if you're using Scrum, okay? You have your coordination meetings, your daily planning meetings. So you are doing planning, albeit in a just-in-time basis. You are doing demonstrations, so you're showing progress to stakeholders via working software. That's what governance wants. They want evidence of progress. You're doing all-hands demonstrations. You're inviting all stakeholders to come in and see all the good work that you're doing. You're doing retrospectives. Good process is part of governance. You have excellent process in agile teams because you're using the right process that makes sense for you. And rather than having this big post-mortem at the end of the project to describe all the reasons, you guys seen this before? Post-implementation reviews? To describe all the reasons why you failed, and the document's that thick. How about we improve as we go? Isn't it better to improve inside the project than after it? So anyway, sorry. I have an opinion about most things. That's one of them. And then information radiators. Agile is about transparency. Anybody can walk into my rooms and see exactly what's going on. There's no secrecy. And I would say in a lot of traditional projects, there's a lot of stuff happening under the covers that people don't know what's going on. None of that happens in Agile. Anybody can see what's going on. And that's a good thing. So that's standard Agile. We would say that DAD makes it even better by a focus on risk management with risk value lifecycle, some very lightweight milestones, following enterprise development guidelines, working closely with enterprise professionals like database groups, development intelligence with automated dashboards. So add some tooling, wall boards. You folks will have heard of those, are good things to do. And then, you know, I'm kind of running out of time, so I won't talk through all these things, but there's good metrics and bad metrics. Like I said, lots of it's discussed in the book. And the nice thing is you can automate most of the stuff. Most of the stuff just comes right out of your tooling. There's awesome tooling now to capture metrics of what the team is doing, reporting progress, and you can make it look real pretty on a dashboard for your management. Okay, you're not getting people sitting down typing stats into Excel or MS Project. You pull the stats right out of the work. And there's a list of kinds of metrics you might want to consider for your Agile projects. Some of them are traditional, like defect density or defect trends, but there's some other Agile ones like burn downs, etc. Okay? So why DAD? You get increased productivity. The risk value lifecycle streamlines development, reduces surprises late in the project. DAD optimizes the whole solution delivery lifecycle, not just the Agile programming part in the middle. Okay? This considers the entire project. It's easy to tailor. It's goal-driven. It's pragmatic. It avoids the one-size-fits-all approach of Agile methods. It's scalable, and it's goal-driven. Talked about that. Answers many of the questions experienced Agile teams are still struggling with. Reflects actual practice, not just the theory. And we feel it's the next step for teams currently doing Scrum and want to go to the next level. And what do you need to succeed? There's impediments. Some people don't like Agile. They don't like the idea that it's very collaborative, that you have, to the degree possible, people working in the same room. Sometimes people don't want to work in the same room, but I can tell you most people do. Once they get the hang of it, they have so much fun, they wouldn't want to go back to their desk that they had before. Some people aren't comfortable with the level of transparency you get in Agile methods. There's no place to hide if you're not performing well on an Agile team. You have daily meetings to describe what you did yesterday and what you're going to work on today. Some people aren't comfortable with that, but most people are. So there's a sustained pace of Agile. We're delivering software every couple weeks, as an example. Some people are uncomfortable with that level of pace. And some people actually don't like to work collaboratively. They prefer to work alone, believe it or not. Okay? So there's some things to avoid. over-specializations, gold plating. Some people are resistant to building without a detailed spec. Often testers are like that. They don't, how can I test if I don't have detailed requirements? Well, there is a way to do it. There's a better way to do it. Start expressing your requirements as tests from the beginning. So there's lots of things you can do there. So in terms of your adoption, if you want to get success in your company, demonstrate early success, very, very important. Get a couple of success, I like to demonstrate working software after being on premises 10 business days. And that surprises people because they've never seen that before. They've never seen a demo after 10 days. Invite people to coordination meetings. Let them see what's going on. Get the buzz going. Because I can tell you, business gets fascinated with all this task board stuff, what the team is doing. And focus on high-value activities. Good agile teams are self-organizing. Many existing managers struggle with this. It's a trust issue. I don't know if I trust my team to do their own planning, but it works. You get motivated teams, and they're much more productive. And then some people actually don't like being self-organizing. They want to be told what to do. It's just a reality. Okay? They're sometimes not good fits. And adapt your disciplined agile governance for agile. And quality is everyone's job. You should have a champion. Usually I go into organizations because there is a champion. There's somebody who wants to get this done. It's a big key to your success. Have somebody internal who's promoting it. A selfish or shameless self-promotion. Use coaches. Salesmanship aside, clearly an agile coach will accelerate your adoption. No question. You want somebody who's done it before many times successfully. If you're trying to get agile in your organization, you can't afford to fail. You can demonstrate success, like I say, in a month. You really can. Longer term coaching is probably better, of course, than 1 month. Because if you go in for a month, you leave, you come back 6 months, and often they've regressed to what they were doing before. There's a diagram here that shows if you're moving from traditional roles, like a business analyst or a tester or a project manager, where might you go on a DAB project? And the solid lines indicate the preferred path, and the light lines indicate other options. So there are places for everybody in a traditional role to go on a DAD project. Now, I don't have time to go through all this in detail, but more information is in the book. And in fact, we talk about the pros and cons of me, as say, going in, if I'm a developer, going into a team lead role, pros and cons of that. A product owner, me going into a product owner role, pros and cons, etc. It will change the relationship of your business. The business and the IT process must reflect one another. Plans must be high level, with the details coming just in time. Emphasize delivery of value via consumable solution rather than transitory work products. I mean documents that don't survive beyond the application going live, like design documents and those kinds of things. If you need deliverable documentation that's needed to support the system, that's different. Schedules and estimates should be given in ranges. A new relationship with the business, they must be actively involved all the way through the life cycle. The greater visibility and control that they now have implies the need for greater accountability on their part. This is an important point. And it's a beautiful thing, actually, that the accountability for what we're building, in what order. I'm competing with birds, aren't I? So it is. The accountability for what gets built in what order now goes to the business where it belongs, rather than on the shoulders of an IT project manager. That's why I was miserable as an IT project manager. It just wasn't fair. You're kind of between a rock and a hard place. If you have product ownership, good product ownership using agile principles, then the IT team is freed to focus on what we do best, which is delivery, and accelerating the delivery that we do and the quality that we do. Let the business deal with the rest. And that's a good thing. And once they understand, they like it, they get it. It's not that hard to understand. So often the business doesn't understand the implications of what they're asking for, so you need to educate them. You definitely need to demonstrate that DAD is not cowboy programming. It is very likely more disciplined than their current processes. Okay. Anti-patterns, we are wrapping up, folks. I know I'm out of time. Thinking you're already agile, thinking you're in a special situation where agile can't help. There's a lot of organizations that say we can never be agile. You can in most situations. It's just to what degree you're agile. Don't let the purists say you're not agile because you do this kind of a document. That's not fair. Okay? Most organizations do have to make some compromises. You shouldn't be kicked out of the agile club. Okay? You can all get along. Let's see what else I want to talk about here. Believing that one agile process is enough. I'm old enough to remember when people used to fight about notations, whether something was a circle or a square and what it meant. We called that the notation wars. And it was prior to something called the Unified Modeling Language, UML. Unfortunately, now we're living through method wars. It used to be the Scrum versus Extreme Programming camp. Now they've realized they need both. And now it's the Scrum-based versus Lean-based. And I tell you, most organizations probably can use both. Lean is very good, by the way, or Kanban approach is very good for maintenance situations, whereas Scrum might be better for greenfield development projects. Okay. Assuming team members with Agile experience on their resume or a certification or Agile experts and don't need coaching, just because you have a certification, DAD certification or not, experience really counts. You need some experience. Okay. DVT is here to help you. And so what DVT is doing is providing courses that we've created, and they have certified instructors to teach these courses. So we have a boot camp, how to move from Scrum to DAD. Should probably rename it. You're not leaving Scrum, you're supplementing Scrum with DAD. That's a boot camp. A professional assessment is how I do most of my business. I go into organizations, either traditional organizations that want to adopt Agile, or existing Agile organizations that want me to come in and say, how are we doing? Can we get better? Or they're failing and they want to know why. And then, so what I'll typically do is take a business partner like DVT and do the assessment side by side, and then leave, and the DVT person would implement the adoption plan for whatever needs to be done. There's training. Oh, by the way, so we have DAD training for executives, because remember you need champions and sponsors. Often, so a middle manager brings me in, the teams below him think they want Agile, but they're not really sure. It's the couple levels above that really aren't too sure what this is all about. So the middle manager or the VP will ask me to come in at the higher level, or DVT or whatever, and say, what is this Agile stuff all about? And get them on board. Practitioner training, as well as specialized courses like how to write good user stories, how to write good acceptance criteria, how to do Agile architecture, how to do Agile database modeling, those kinds of supplementary courses. And running pilot projects is always a good thing with coaches by your side to make sure you're successful. There's a certification program I told you about. So there's a couple of websites that you should, if you're interested to learn more. DisciplinedAgileDelivery.com, easy, is where the blog is. So improvements that we've made since the book are going into the blog and will appear in the next edition of the book, as well as really good discussions and articles like how does DAD compare to RUP, how does DAD compare to Water Scrum Fall, how does it compare to Scrum, etc. So that's a certification program, digitalagileconsortium.org. So again, if you're a Scrum Master, you can be a yellow belt. All you need to do is pass the test. But there's more to DAD than Scrum, so you would need to probably read the book or go to a workshop, but reading the book would be fine. And so this shirt, it says Got Discipline. It's us being a little bit cheeky. Are any of you familiar with the Got Milk campaign? I understand it did run here. I've heard some people say they've heard it before. But it's this idea to try and make milk cool. The dairy producers sponsored it. So you would go in and rather than asking for a Coke or a beer, you'd say, got milk? And it was trying to make Coke cool, or milk cool. So we say, got discipline? You're Agile, but got discipline? And so that's what that's all about. And that's our website, scottambler.com, and DVT's website is there as well. And bottom line to all this, our tagline is context counts. You need to adapt to your situation. We really do get kind of tired by people who are very purist in your approach to say, because you know what, that's not doing us any favors. I understand what good classic Scrum is and why it works, but if management's not bought in, or there's regulatory reasons, or whatever it is, or just deeply entrenched stuff that's really hard to change, I would much rather adjust and still be allowed to do Agile than be told, okay, out with the Agile, you're back to doing waterfall. Which would you rather want, really, right? So taking a pragmatic approach. There's more Scott's books. I'm out of time. I'm over time. I apologize. Once I start, I can't stop. Any questions? Anyone? Any burning issues? If not, we're going to hang around for a bit. I'd love to talk to any of you if you have anything to say. Hopefully this was worthwhile, a worthwhile 2-hour investment of your time. Thanks for coming.